Hello and welcome to Trails Worth Hiking, the show that brings you some of the most interesting backpacking and trekking routes in the world. I'm your host, Jeremy Pendry. In the first part of the show, we bring you the story and history of a trail. Then we tell you what it's like to hike the trail and how you can do it. On this episode, we'll be describing a trail that takes less than a week to hike, but takes you south to north across an entire European country, where you'll go through every village in the country and past storybook castles and villages and walk along the Rhine River and through forests, all while being in the middle of the majestic Alps in the heart of Europe. On this episode of Trails Worth Hiking, we travel the Liechtenstein Trail in, where else, Liechtenstein. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Quick reminder that if you value the content that I'm putting out, I would really appreciate your financial support. If you go to buymeacoffee.com/trailsworthhiking or click on the link in the description of the episode, you can become a member of Trails Worth Hiking and support the show for only $3 a month, which is less than a cup of coffee, or $30 a year. And I'd like to thank new members, David Poirier, TB Messing, and Izzy Domine. Thank you very much to each of you for becoming members and supporting the show. Your contributions help me expand the content that we have and to cover the costs of creating the show. And for any of you who have become a member recently and I haven't thanked on the show yet, I will do so on a future episode. Thanks again to all of you. All right, our guest on this episode is listener Brett Bauch. Brett is experienced with some pretty serious technical mountaineering over his hiking and climbing career, but the trail that we're going to talk about on this episode is very different than that. There are lots of great trails in the Alps that we could choose to cover, but Liechtenstein is an interesting place. It's one of those smaller European countries that we all know exists but don't know much about. I think before looking into this for this episode, I probably thought of it like a city-state, kind of like Monaco, but it's not. It's bigger than that. It has 11 different municipalities and covers a little bit more ground than I thought it did, although still an approachable size. In any event, I was surprised to learn that Liechtenstein had its own trail covering the entire country, essentially. And to me, it seemed like one that my wife and I would really enjoy hiking together. And so I was very excited to hear about this trail, and I think you'll enjoy hearing about it as well. So as I mentioned, Liechtenstein is in the Alps. It's in Central Europe, between Austria and Switzerland. It's situated in the Upper Rhine Valley, so the valley where the Rhine River goes through. It has a relatively mild climate due to the prevailing winds in that valley. So despite its alpine location, it actually stays a little bit more temperate than you would expect, which may be why some people say that you can hike this trail any time of the year. Liechtenstein is Europe's fourth smallest country. The other countries that are actually smaller are Vatican City, Monaco, and San Marino. Liechtenstein is 62 square miles, or 160 square kilometers. It has a population of just over 41,000 people. It has one of the world's lowest crime rates and no military. So, at least in its modern incarnation, a fairly peaceful place. Liechtenstein was formed in 1719, but became fully independent from what was then a German empire in 1866. Liechtenstein is a monarchy ruled by the Prince of Liechtenstein, who, since 1989, has been Hans Adam II, though his son currently rules in practice. Though the prince has not abdicated his ability to rule, but his son is the one who handles things day to day. The prince and his family are billionaires. He is one of the world's richest monarchs. And in addition to having a lot of wealth for the monarchy, it is one of the very few countries in the world to have virtually no debt. So the country itself is in pretty good financial shape in addition to having a wealthy monarch. In antiquity, Liechtenstein was part of the Roman province of Raetia, or Raetia. There's a Roman road running north to south along the Rhine, parts of which are integrated into the Liechtenstein Trail, particularly Stage 3 from Nendeln to Vaduz. The town of Schaan has remnants of a Roman border fort as well. During the Middle Ages, it became part of the Carolingian Empire. During the Middle Ages, there was also an influx of a people from the Swiss canton of Valais. These are the Walser people. They're a distinct cultural group in the Triesenberg region of Liechtenstein. They're known as farmers and cattle breeders in the high mountain areas. They speak their own dialect that is non-intelligible to other German speakers. They came in about the 13th century. Anyway, that was just one of the changes that happened during the Middle Ages. Liechtenstein changed hands several times until Prince Johann Adam Andreas of Liechtenstein bought the provinces that by 1719 became Liechtenstein. Holy Roman Emperor Charles VI gave it a principality status. So one thing that's interesting is that Liechtenstein, the name, is actually named after the family that founded it and still controls it. So interesting that it is literally the lands of the family of Liechtenstein. Napoleon and the French controlled Liechtenstein for a few years when Napoleon had swept through Europe. Then it became part of the German Federation until its independence in 1866. Liechtenstein was neutral during World War I and World War II. There was an attempted coup in 1939 that failed, where Germany could have backed the coup and probably taken control, but it didn't for whatever reason. So it defeated the coup and stayed neutral. Since then, it became a financial and tax haven with high secrecy around financial matters and low taxes, a bit like its neighbor Switzerland regarding the secrecy aspect. In fact, Liechtenstein has more registered companies than citizens. But then there were scandals in 2008 and 2017, and Liechtenstein has been working to be more transparent around financial issues since then. The population speaks primarily Alemannic, which is a dialect of German. Brett and I joked about its one-person Olympic team, but historically it has actually done quite well in the Olympics with a very small team. It has won more medals per capita than any other country, all of them in alpine skiing, making it the only country to win medals in the Winter Olympics, but not the Summer Olympics. So in conclusion, in thinking about the history of the country, it's really the story of a small, somewhat forgotten rural landholding at one time that has blossomed into a modern fairy tale sort of storybook-looking financial center. And it's quite a major transformation over time, and that was somewhat improbable. And today, Liechtenstein is thriving. Being in the Alps, Liechtenstein has some of the fauna you'd expect. It has the chamois and ibex, which are both a form of mountain goat. It has marmots, deer, squirrel, lynx, fox, and beavers. There's quite a bit of waterfowl in the lower elevation regions, plus eagles and storks as well. Over 40% of the country is forested. It has spruce and fir, beech, larch, maple, and linden. The Liechtenstein Trail itself is relatively new. It was created in 2019 to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the country. It was created by Liechtenstein Marketing, which is an agency that's mainly funded by the government. So even though it was sort of a marketing idea to create this trail, that doesn't mean it's not a fantastic trail. And in fact, I think from all accounts, by Brett, they've done quite a wonderful job, and it has become a pretty great trail to hike. As I mentioned, the trail goes through all 11 municipalities of the country. It passes 147 historical points, and as Brett discusses, there's an app you can get called the Listery app that helps you follow the different historical sites as you hike the trail. So that's a bit of the background on Liechtenstein. Before we jump into my conversation with Brett, I want to remind you to buy your backpacking meals at Outdoor Herbivore. Check Instagram right now to see what item we have on special at the moment. Outdoor Herbivore is featuring items that I've selected that are some of my favorite meals, and we're rotating those on a periodic basis. So if you check the podcast Instagram account at Trails Worth Hiking Podcast, you can see the most recent post we've had that mentions which item is on sale. It'll be a 20% discount, I believe, which is double the discount we usually have at Outdoor Herbivore, but only for that particular item. give you a chance to try something that I enjoy. As you know, Outdoor Herbivore makes delicious vegetarian and vegan backpacking meals that everyone can enjoy. They use high quality ingredients. They're delicious meals. They have lots of calories, which is essential when you're out on a multi-day backpacking trip. Outdoor Herbivore at outdoorherbivore.com. Thanks again to Outdoor Herbivore for sponsoring the show. And as I've mentioned before, their sponsorship helps me stay supplied with backpacking meals on all my adventures. So thanks again to Outdoor Herbivore. All right, with that, let's jump into my conversation with Brett Bauch. Brett Bauch, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Brett, how did the Liechtenstein Trail get on your radar? And the reason I asked that is that there are a lot of trails in the Alps, and this was not one that I was very familiar with before hearing from you about it. So how did this become one that got to be something you were interested in doing?
Well, I wanted to do something a little more quirky. I've done some trips with groups. I've done trips with my wife, and a couple of the trips with my wife were sleeping on the ground. She was up for the exertion, but wanted to stay in hotels. And it's relatively new. And I thought that the country, just the history of the country, is really interesting. For most of the trip, the Rhine is on your left and the Alps are on your right, which is spectacular. So I wanted to do something a little bit off the beaten path.
And did you do the trip with just your wife, or were there other folks along with you as well?
Another couple. So Steve and Annie, just our calendars hadn't overlapped with prior trips. They'd wanted to try to work something out where we could all be together. And so I'd planned some preliminary just for me and my wife, but then we made sure that the calendars overlapped and they joined us.
Okay. And what did you do to plan this trip? Was this something where there's a really good resource online, or is there a book, or what did you figure out to make this happen?
There is a Listery app. So Liechtenstein Tourism has a fantastic app.
Okay.
And I would recommend everybody interested download that for free. You can obviously pick your language, and where your start point is, it will show the whole trail in stages. And as you're hiking it, if your phone is GPS connected, it will actually give you important historical notices at different spots along the path.
Oh, neat.
Interesting current events at different points along the path. Obviously helps you stay on the path. And it's amazing resource. It works really well.
So you mentioned that the river would be on your left and the mountains would be on your right. So that means you're going south to north?
Correct. Yeah. So you start, at least how we started, and I think how most people take a trail is starting on the border with Switzerland in the southwest and then moving north with the Rhine. I mean, you're seeing the Rhine unless you're in the forest. You can see the Rhine most days for parts of the days. You're passing through these little villages. Sometimes you're up in the hills, sometimes you're in the valley. And the country itself gets thinner as you go north. So I think you're going northeast, but you're mostly going north, and the country just gets skinnier. You end up on the border with Austria.
What are the other natural features you're seeing along the way? So you've got the river, you've got the mountains. Are there lakes? Is it forested, or is it more open? What does it look like?
Well, the valley to the Rhine, I mean, the whole country, I think, is 60 square miles, give or take. The whole trail is around 50 or less miles. So you're seeing quite a bit. You're seeing out in the distance on some days what you're going to trek through the next day. And yeah, you're up in the woods. What we thought was kind of entertaining is we'd be a mile into the woods and we'd find jungle gyms and little kids playing. And it was a bit of a culture shock to look around, and they're a mile into the woods doing pull-ups and doing actual exercise.
You kind of wonder, like, who put that there? How did that get there?
I know. And then you'll find the app will light up, and there'll be a little interactive thing about gnomes that are historically believed to live there and with magical powers, and lots of interactive stuff in the woods and along the trail, which was really neat. Though it's all in German, but obviously Google Translate, you can pick it up pretty fast. And the app is in English, German, I don't know how many languages it has. But we never had a problem with GPS connection, and the signage along the trail is fantastic. Whether you're in a town or in the forest, we always felt like we knew where we were.
Is it a rural setting as well? Meaning, are there farms and farm animals and that kind of thing in the area as you're hiking through?
Absolutely. We passed through maybe two vineyards, one for sure near Vaduz. There are castles, a couple castles that you can either, we walked around them. We didn't do tours, few art galleries, gorgeous old churches throughout. And yeah, we passed through some areas where we hesitated because we were supposed to go through gates through pasture land with cows.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of, looked at each other. Are we really supposed to go right through this? But apparently, and the cows didn't care. Along one gorgeous kind of storybook hillside, we were on a gravel trail. There were cottages around us, a valley down to the west, and the Rhine, and donkeys wandering around. It was beautiful. It seemed like a movie set.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if I've ever heard this for another trail, is that it goes through 11, and I'm not sure if it's villages or towns or districts, or if it actually goes through each of the towns.
Municipalities, probably.
But what was interesting is it goes through all 11 of the entire country. And I know, as we've talked about, it's a very small country, but that's still interesting that it really covers every little section of population of the country as you hike through. Is that what your experience was?
Yeah, that's, I think they call them municipalities, but it is tiny. So it sounds more impressive until you realize it's 40,000 people. And you've got Austria, covers the whole eastern state. It's double landlocked. So it's Switzerland on the west and Austria on the east.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. There is a little pocket off to the east that you can add a day trip, but it isn't connected to the main trail.
Mm.
We didn't do that because that would have been a bus. We actually hiked the entirety of the trail.
Okay.
But there is an extra day, and I think that might be targeted towards skiers. I'm not quite sure what that area is in the southeast, but yeah, it's great. So you can tell sometimes, I think, some of the zigzagging of the trail and the layout is done so they can check that box to say you saw all of it.
I guess if you've done this trail, you really don't have to go back to Liechtenstein. You've seen the whole thing.
I know. Yeah, that's good. You can check the box and say, oh, have you been to the Dummel coffee shop? Oh, of course I've been to that coffee shop.
You mentioned that there's a couple castles. Are those something you can actually detour to see while you're hiking the trail, or maybe you see before you hike or after you hike the trail? Or what about those kinds of cultural sites?
Sure. I think the trail layout, tourism board, the app is fantastic. I think they make a point of taking you past those most impressive historical sites and points of interest. So the first day, we spent the night we came into Zurich, and then we showed up in Balzers, which is in the southwest, and spent the night there that first night. And when we woke up, backtrack a little bit on foot from where the bus had dropped us, and we went to the border with Switzerland, just again to check the box and say we hiked the entirety of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, the trail takes you right past a gorgeous castle. We did not go inside and tour it, but we walked around the grounds, and we were up at a high point so we could overlook the city. There are a couple of spots like that. Coming into Vaduz, you come right past a castle. I think with that small of a footprint, they can zigzag you to make sure you're walking right past the historical sites.
What time of year did you do this hike, and what is the sort of window you would recommend for people?
We went in August. I have had a couple people reach out actually on Instagram since, just people I didn't know who saw pictures and asked for advice. One of them went in September and had bad weather. It rained for much of it. Seasonally, I think we might have just been lucky more than anything. I think July and August are the primary times when people are hiking it just because it's temperate, but I'm speculating there. I think avoiding the need for winter warm weather gear probably makes the backpack a little bit lighter. We had rain gear and boots, but we weren't too worried about being cold.
One of the things I saw in researching this trail is that some people say it's actually a year-round trail and that you could actually do this in winter. And I don't know if they mean walking or on snowshoes or skiing, but what struck me as interesting about that is most of the trails in the Alps go through some pretty high passes, what would make that really difficult. Does this trail mostly stay in the valleys, or does it, why do you think that that's even possible, that somebody would consider that possible to do?
On average, you're passing through, you start in a town, you end in a town, and you probably pass through one or two on the way. Mm-hmm. So I think a general 6 to 12 miles a day is your distance. So if you had snowshoes or boots, you might be outside of town for a couple hours, but you're not going to be able to get into much trouble without hitting the next
I
town.
see.
You might have some vertical gain if you're in the foothills or you're going up in through the forest, but again, you might bump into some local kids who are up there playing anyway. Yeah, I think it would be very doable year round if you just brought warmer gear and potentially snowshoes.
Okay. You mentioned that it's almost 50 miles, and I have it as 75 kilometers or about 47 miles. I know that there are 5 official stages. Did you guys do the trek in those 5 stages, or did you do it in a different amount of time?
Yeah, we did 5 days, and they have stages broken out. We followed some people do it in 3 or 4, some people do it in 6. We didn't bump into very many people doing the trail, but those that we met with, most were doing the same cadence that we were doing.
And how did you find that cadence? Was it about right?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Like I said, we would usually in the mornings, you have a breakfast in a hotel. We tried to get out before 9 a.m. each day. And these hotels, it's interesting booking through the app and coordinating with tourism because the hotels are all in on this, if you will. So
I
at
see.
breakfast, they have a little sandwich station, aluminum foil. You can make your own sandwiches to eat on the move. And they know who you are because there's luggage transfer between the hotels.
Okay.
So it's very well coordinated, very organized, and we never had any issues logistics wise.
How about the difficulty of the hiking itself? Is it, I don't know how much up and down it is. I know it's in the mountains, but it's also next to the river. So is this a fairly moderate hike as far as difficulty?
I would call it moderate. It's all in the eye of the beholder, but our group didn't have trouble. We had some days where we were in the woods for quite a while with a lot of relatively gain, but no one thought they couldn't do it at any point for the 4 of us.
And what was the overall quality of the trail itself? Was this a really well maintained trail?
Absolutely. You'd be in the middle of the woods. You knew you were on a trail. Sometimes you'd see offshoots, but then at a pretty frequent increment, you'd have another big red and blue sign, Liechtenstein Trail with an arrow. You often would find wooden signs pointing in the woods with town names. So you're 2 miles from a road and on some woods or valley signage, it's telling you where you're coming from and where you're going to reinforce that you're on the right path.
You mentioned that the accommodations can actually be booked through the Liechtenstein app. You called it, is it Listery, the name of the app?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but yes, Listery, if you look it up, or Liechtenstein Tourism.
Okay.
And I was emailing with Karina, I believe is her name, and we joked that she ran the whole country because I was feeling like it was too easy. As an example, in some of the towns, you have choices on where you stay, but the pricing is the same regardless.
How is the pricing? Is this pricey compared to other kind of European overnight stays, or is this pretty comparable?
I think it's comparable. Our pricing was wrapped in with a couple nights in Zurich too. So that wasn't through Liechtenstein, but
Okay.
we wanted to spend a night there. Some people get right into Balzers and southwestern Liechtenstein, start going. We wanted to come in, spend the night, get acclimated and comfortable.
So the prices are essentially comparable to other places in Europe. So folks that can afford to go to Europe and stay in bed and breakfast type of accommodations, Liechtenstein will be familiar kind of pricing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the accommodations were very nice. What was interesting is I wasn't dealing directly with the hotels. I was dealing with Karina, who runs Liechtenstein apparently. And she would ask which of the 2 hotels in this town do you want to stay in? And the pricing was identical. So do you want to stay in a modern hotel outside of city center, or do you want to stay on a more traditional old-fashioned hotel right in city center, as an example?
Oh, that's nice. So you actually have a choice of sort of what style you prefer.
Yep, in a couple of the towns. In a few of the towns, it was, this is it. And in all cases, we had spectacular, one place, no choice, spectacular view on a hillside overlooking a valley in the Rhine. We certainly didn't feel like we were missing out.
So you mentioned Zurich. So to get there, is Zurich the best airport to fly into?
Yes, if you're starting in the southwest, which to my knowledge is where most people start, you can start in the northeast and go down from Austria. So if you're flying that way, it's also interesting looking at hotel stays and looking at the cities when I was researching Liechtenstein. A lot of the hotels in Western Liechtenstein will actually show up on some search engines as being in Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
And then in parentheses next to it, it says Liechtenstein. So it's almost like they were under the umbrella of the Austrians way back when, and then after World War I, they were under the umbrella of Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have their own military. They just kind of fly under the radar, I guess.
Well, they only have, I think, like 46,000 total citizens, and I think they have a prince, and then they have, what was her name? Karina? They have Karina and a prince.
Yeah, who runs tourism for the whole country. And the prince, and they have I don't know if it's officially a monarchy or how they structure the government officially. Might be more like the British, but they have a vineyard that you walk through. They have a castle. They have a palace that's in Vaduz.
It's like a little mini microcosm of Europe in one place.
Yeah, and the history of Europe too in one place, right in the center. It's sort of a miracle that it's still there as an independent country.
Yeah. So you mentioned luggage transfer as being very convenient for this trip. As far as what you carry during the day, is there anything that is out of the ordinary or particular that you would recommend people carry, or pretty much standard? Carry some snacks, carry a lunch that you can make in the morning at the bed and breakfast, and maybe some rain gear?
Rain gear, water bottle. A really, we were a little worried about access to water, but regular intervals, there's fresh water available.
Okay.
And it's beautiful. It's obviously it's potable, but it looks like it's out of, The Sound of Music or something. Different
Nice.
spots throughout. And inside the towns as well, there are public water filling stations. So we brought extra empty Nalgene bottles that we probably didn't need.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know how frequently we'd be able to refill. Yeah, it was beautiful. Maybe a fleece, rain pants, rain jacket, boots, nothing exotic.
Okay.
I would say.
Any permits required?
No visas or anything like that. Obviously, we went out of our way.
I also mean for the trail, like there's no trail permits required to do the hike.
No.
Okay.
Trekking poles, I would recommend trekking poles. I'm always
Sure.
a fan of those.
Okay.
We saw people without them, but no permits needed. No, I mean, I don't, without the app, I'm sure you could still just show up in Liechtenstein and start hiking it.
Okay.
And you just have to figure out your own sleeping arrangements each night, and luggage transfer wouldn't be provided. So the weight of your pack is minimal.
Perfect.
10 pounds or less, I'm guessing.
Yeah. You mentioned that they speak German. It sounds like though English is widely spoken or spoken widely enough to be used.
Absolutely. We had on the ride back, so we hiked up we ended up in the border with Austria. We went through the motions, which I think the Austrian border patrol wasn't thrilled with us, but we wanted to make sure our passport got stamped. That proved
Okay.
that we actually
They didn't
made it
like
to the
that?
border. Well, they were like, the Americans are hanging out to make me stamp the thing. And then we backtracked, and then we're on a bus. And first we backtracked back to our hotel, got our duffel bags, and then it's sort of on you at that point to get yourself wherever you're going. Maybe you're staying in Austria at the end of the trail, or maybe you're backtracking, or taking a bus back to the border with Switzerland, which was our approach.
Mm-hmm.
People were kicking up conversations with us. Everyone was very friendly. They would maybe give you the generosity of starting in German and quickly pivot to English, but it was pretty obvious. We were tourists trekking and wandering about. So what was entertaining about it is taking the bus back. We were less than 5 minutes behind the scheduled arrival at the border. And there was this businessman kicked up a conversation with me and was apologizing for how it was behind.
Yeah, right.
And that they're unforgivable type. Actually, this is pretty good. We're going to be fine. No, this is not okay. It's not. The stranger on a bus was apologizing to me unsolicited. 3 minutes delay or something like that.
So take me through the stages a little bit and talk about any highlights or anything you particularly liked starting from south to north, or anything noteworthy that you'd like to mention about the different stages along the way.
Absolutely. One thing that also that's interesting is part of this trail, there's curated freebies, I guess I'll say, with different vendors. So
Ah,
a reason perhaps to deviate from the trail a bit, to get a free cup of coffee or a free ceramic mug or a stamp. It's really well done.
okay.
And as you pass into some of these towns, you have the opportunity to deviate 2 blocks and maybe get a free pastry or a free glass of wine.
And that's all through the app?
That is actually a paper book that is
Ah,
provided to you before the trip. So
okay.
it's coordinated through the app. Karina, again, who runs the place, she makes sure you get that. And you can email her directly. But it was great. It worked really well. It's not organized by, I think it might be alphabetical by town, but one little bit of, certainly not criticism, but feedback would be to have it by the path that you're taking.
Sure.
So the sort of the chronology of your hike. And we arrived in Balzers and slept in a beautiful hotel. And then, like I said, we backtracked to the Swiss border on the first day. Gutenberg Castle is the name of the castle that overlooks that village. It was beautiful. And hiked past that, went through, I think I'm probably going to massacre the pronunciation, Treason to Triesenberg.
Mm-hmm.
And there are interactive spots, as I said, throughout. Some are in German, but Google Translate covers that. That was day one. That's, I don't know, 9 or 10 miles maybe.
Okay.
Beautiful. And day two, Triesenberg to Vaduz. We saw donkeys again. You're in the woods, you're in these villages. You come out of the woods and the Rhine's on your left in a valley. It was just beautiful.
How big is the Rhine at this point? It's must be. Is this a smaller portion of the Rhine before it gets as big as it is in Germany?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's not crossable. Well, there's a bridge. So ironically, when you get to Vaduz, and this shows how neutral, I guess, Liechtenstein is.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no border patrol. So there's a bridge that from Vaduz that crosses to Switzerland. We walked across it. We walked into Switzerland. We walked around. No one cared. and you cross the Rhine. It's a beautiful wooden bridge. And we went down by the river on the Swiss side and then came back. But Vaduz is the capital. That's where the monarchy is based.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little town with the castle overlooking the city and the palace overlooking the city. And then the next day, we visited an art gallery while we were there, which was beautiful. I think that gallery actually might have been one of the free things provided by tourism to make sure you check it out.
Okay.
Next day, then we hiked out, and most mornings we would try to get out of the hotel by 9 a.m. because we wanted to get to the next town with a few hours to check it out in daylight.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Sean, I think is how it's pronounced. There were a couple block deviation in that town, and we went to see this coffee shop demo, which was wonderful. The owner was fantastic. Also, the Olympic Committee for Liechtenstein's there, and they have a big office. I think they only have one Olympian, though.
Okay.
Which we got a kick
He
out of
gets
that.
his own office?
Yeah, it's its own building, I think. We almost went in just to say, can we get an Olympic pin? We didn't. We thought about it.
It has to be a winter sport, I would imagine, that this Olympian.
Yeah, I can't remember if it's. I would be inclined to believe he's a skier, but I don't recall.
Okay.
And then you're hiking through there's a kind of a gravel hill as we move through the forest, Planken, as beautiful overlooks. And you at that point you're crossing over. I wouldn't call it these are not steep mountains, but there's a significant sustained downhill. And then Nendland is where you end that stage, and that has a beautiful ceramics shop, which you get one included little ceramic mug, and they'll give you a full tour, and it goes back hundreds of years. It's amazing.
Nice.
Again, I don't know if they knew we were coming, but they certainly knew we were there and were very generous with time. We woke up there and moved through to Eschen, and there's a gorgeous church in Bendern. Again, it's up to you whether you visit or not. Goats wandering about. Again, it felt like, I don't know, some parts of it felt like a Disney reenactment of what you would fantasize about it looking like. It was beautiful. And then we ended that day. Now we're at that point, we're pretty far north and we're pretty close to Austria. That was one of the towns where we had Rugel, I believe is how it's pronounced. We had a choice in hotels, and we stayed in a more modern one that was, again, the distances. When I was talking to the tourism about, backtracking, we get to the Austrian border, well, then don't we have to backtrack to the last stage? Basically 3 miles. So you're like, oh yeah, you kind of think of these things, and in the scale of the reality of it, it's not that bad. Whether you get a bus or just start walking. And again, gorgeous, beautiful restrooms, water access, restaurants throughout. There are stages where you spend a couple hours in the woods, so you definitely want to pack a lunch in the morning. And then the last day, Schönewald, you go up, you're sort of on I don't want to say a plateau, but an overlook, and to your left for a few hours, you're looking into Austria, and you're on the top of a ridge line.
Oh, wow.
Then you drop down into Austria, random cows everywhere, and it was great. In Schönewald, we were running the border, and you can backtrack hiking or you can catch a bus. It seemed like questions that I had were implying, it seemed like it was going to be too easy. I had lots of questions where the Liechtenstein tourism, that it's as simple and logistically as easy as we're stating it. It's not going to get complicated, and they were right.
That's great to hear. There are a lot of hikes where it can be overly complicated, and so it's good to hear that there's one out there where it's very simple to set up, and it sounds like everyone was very welcoming, and it sounds like it was a nice hike with beautiful views and cultural sites. So what is not to love? I mean, one of the things I always ask is, why is this a trail worth hiking? I think I just mentioned a bunch of reasons, but for you, what coming away from it, what stands out is why this is one that people should consider.
Well, it was more than 5 beautiful days. It's still relatively new. We only met a couple groups that were doing it. The Rhine's beautiful. The Alps are beautiful. There's no real language barrier. German's prevalent, but most of the people we interacted with were pretty quick with English once they realized we weren't native to Germany. And it was also interesting. You mentioned the 11 municipalities. It's neat to say, we hiked 47 miles, and there isn't really much of Liechtenstein left to see. Not that we wouldn't go back.
Right.
You cover an entire country in a week.
Is there a particular moment or memory that stands out for you, or you think will stand out as you look back on this?
The last night in Liechtenstein, we had bumped into a couple times a group from Dallas. I'm out of Wisconsin. And they had picked up buses at certain stages and skipped. We hiked the whole thing, but they wanted to shop and do more touristy things in the towns, and so their time was constrained. At any rate, they ended up by happenstance in the same restaurant outside as we were on the last night. And there were these cute puppies. The owner came out and was joining us. This crew from Dallas was a lot of fun, and we had a really neat meal together and talked about what we'd experienced in the prior 5 days, which was neat.
That's great. Anything you would do differently if you did it again? It sounds like it was fairly easy to set up, so maybe not, but just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I would say it was pretty easy to set up. I'm trying to think of, I can't think of anything I would have hoped for. The weather held, that was probably the biggest variable. And we had the gear for it, but we didn't need it. Yeah, we didn't have any currency issues. We didn't have any transport issues. The Swiss app for the train, if you're going in through Zurich, make sure you get the app and get your train tickets figured out.
Okay.
It's not complicated. They're very helpful as well. But that surely wasn't a hiccup. It was just a little bit of uncertainty before we crossed the border on the best way to do it.
Okay.
Bring the correct converter for electrical.
Right, of course.
Which we brought. We had a few of them, but that would be, I guess, something that would have been a pitfall.
All right, Brett. Well, thank you for telling us about your hike on the Liechtenstein Trail. But while I've got you, I've got a few more questions if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
What is the next trip on your list?
Well, we're brainstorming. My wife and I, Katie, we have 2 sons, and we've done some trips together. We're potentially going to do a family hike, the Dolomites or Dolomites, depending on who you ask. And if that doesn't pan out, I'll probably climb the Matterhorn next year.
Oh, wow.
So it's either or, theoretically both, but probably either or.
Okay. And so you mentioned before we started recording that you've climbed Denali before. So you're a real climber in addition to being a hiker. So that's cool that you get so much enjoyment out of doing a trip like the Liechtenstein Trail, but also really want to do some more technical, difficult things like climbing. And so that could be cool to do the Matterhorn.
Yep. And I enjoy spending time with my wife, so I have to triage sometimes.
I totally understand. I'm in the same boat. Although I'm not a climber, but as far as doing the difficult long trips versus the ones that she will enjoy.
She's up for strenuous. I think it's what's the sleeping arrangement going to be at the end of this? And she's done
Yeah.
Asangate, and she did Kilimanjaro with me years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So she's certainly up for it, but she'd prefer, if I'm sweaty for 6 hours, it'd be great to have a shower at the end of the day. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. Fair. All right. What is the best campsite or backcountry spot you've ever been to?
Probably High Camp at Denali, but that I'm biased. And it was more about the people that I was interacting with up there. We were stuck in weather for a few days, and it was just a really, really interesting group of random people from around the world helping build snow walls for tents as new teams came in. So that will always be close to my heart.
That's interesting that you said that spot, which is, what's the elevation of that spot, if you know, or roughly?
17,000 plus.
So you're at this amazingly high spot in the snow. I imagine if it's clear at all, you've got incredible views. And I think it's amazing that despite all that, what makes it the best campsite ever for you is the people. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I'll give you a little anecdote. A guide, because the weather was holding us, so we had a lot more time to have conversations. It was, I think, SAS, British Special Forces, were doing Northern Combat training there, and they were also stuck, and a guide, and we were having this conversation, and one of the British guys asked me, he was talking about Nepal, and he asked me my favorite place to climb in Nepal, and I chuckled and said, I just found out on my InReach Mini that my son got a job at Culver's. That's what I'm excited about. And my coolness dropped immediately in his eyes. He's like, oh, I've never been to Nepal. I'd love to go to Nepal. That's not my everyday thing, though. I was flattered that he assumed that I had a favorite spot to climb in Nepal.
Yeah. But nonetheless, you guys were able to get along.
Oh, yeah. He was great. They built a really beautiful bathroom. So when they left, they built this palace out of ice and snow. All these other groups were trying to claim that as their restroom once the British moved out.
That's funny. All right, final question. What is the most valuable thing that backpacking or trekking or hiking has taught you?
To keep moving forward, and something that might seem insurmountable or really complicated, you still want to think ahead and plan, but just moving up or forward a couple feet can completely change your perspective on things.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's the old idea of one step at a time is true, but what you just said there at the end is actually the really poignant part, which is that just taking that next step, you might feel differently than you did a moment ago when it seemed insurmountable. And each time you take another step, it changes your attitude potentially. That's great.
Absolutely.
All right, Brett Bauch, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great program.
Thanks again to Brett Bauch for coming on the show, and I hope that we've inspired you to hike the Liechtenstein Trail. And if you enjoyed this episode, tell a friend about it, or better yet, give us a good review on whichever podcast service you use. And keep in mind that this podcast is entertainment and meant to spark your interest. If you decide to hike the trail, do your own research. Like anything else worth doing, outdoor adventure has risk. So when you go, pack your common sense, and when you get back, tell me how it went. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, well, we have a couple of great episodes coming up. I'm not sure which of them will come out first, so I'll tell you about both. One is an update episode. In February, I went to South Florida to hike the Ocean to Lake Trail, which we covered in episode 49. The Loxahatchee chapter of the Florida Trail Association puts on an annual group hike of the trail, and I joined them and met lots of wonderful people during the hike, learned a lot about the South Florida region, And over 6 days, I thru-hiked this trail through palmetto grasslands, lush subtropical landscapes, and bald cypress swamp, where, yes, we did see alligators, but we also saw a bald eagle, a tortoise, and lots of other wonderful local creatures. So that'll be one of our episodes coming up. On our next episode about a trail that we haven't yet covered, we'll be going to an entirely different environment, where we'll be walking 180 kilometers circling an entire peninsula that is part of an island nation, where we'll hike on beaches, rugged coastal paths, narrow country lanes, sheep pastures, and mountainous moorlands, and we'll stay in charming local inns as we hike the Dingle Way on the Dingle Peninsula in County Kerry, Ireland. If you have any questions or feedback on this episode, or ideas for future episodes, including if you want to be a guest and talk about a trail that you've hiked, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com. Also, check out our website, trailsworthhiking.com, and follow us on Instagram at trailsworthhikingpodcast. As I mentioned before, support the show at buymeacoffee.com/trailsworthhiking. And a reminder to check out my retirement-focused YouTube channel at GoGo Retirement on YouTube. All right, that is it for this episode. So start planning your next hike, and before you know it, you'll be on the trail. Thanks for listening.